Hello and welcome back to the AWS series, and in this chapter we will be talking about the concept of a Bastion host in AWS. Before we jump into the details of our Bastion host, it's really important for you to understand the concept of our Bastion host, and for that I have taken a very simplistic example which is really easy to understand. So here onto the screen you can see the three objects. On the top right corner you will see a castle. In the middle, you will see a tunnel, which is like an entrance for this particular castle. And on the left hand side, you will see an intruder or a trespasser. The idea over here is anyone who wants to access to this particular castle has to go through this particular tunnel. And this is not an ordinary tunnel. This is a heavily guarded tunnel with an armory. So anyone with a valid access to this particular castle will not have a problem. But anyone who is an intruder or who doesn't have a valid access to this particular tunnel, a necessary action will be taken against him. And he will be prohibited from entering into this particular castle. Now you might be wondering that how it makes sense when we are talking about AWS and I'm talking about this tunnel and this castle. So here this particular tunnel is heavily guarded and this is a tunnel for doing all the security checks for us. So same thing applies for the Bastion host also. So in AWS context we will be calling this tunnel as our Bastion host, where everyone who wants to access our AWS network or AWS resources has to go through this particular tunnel. And this particular castle on the right hand side will be our AWS environment where our resources will be running. Compare our castle example with this AWS setup which I'm showing to you right now. So here on the left hand side you will see a user which has access to internet gateway so that he can access our AWS network. But here we are having public subnet and the private subnet. So whenever we talk about the Bastion host, then Bastion host is always available into the public subnet so that any user can access that Bastion host. And if that user has a proper access, then he eventually will be able to access the resources into our private subnet. So if we compare these both example, which is our castle example and this AWS setup, then here you will see the tunnel will sit over here into the public subnet where it will be safeguarded and any access will be screened over here. And this EC2 will be the area where our castle will sit in. So here any user who is coming to our AWS network has to go through our Bastion host. And if the access has been granted to that particular user, then he will or she will be able to access our resources into our private subnet. And the private subnet, I mean the castle, which the example I have shown you previously. We know the concept of a Bastion host, so let's jump onto our AWS console and start setting up this whole environment so that we can see how the Bastion host work in actual AWS environment. So let's start with our demo, and here onto the screen you can see this is my AWS console. So let's jump back to our slide and start with our first element which is needed for this whole setup. So here onto the screen, you can see this is the architecture, or this is the desired environment which we want to implement. So here the first block which you will see is the AWS boundary. But this AWS boundary means you need to have an AWS account. So here onto the screen, you can see I have an AWS console, so which means I have a proper AWS account. So let's take a look again onto this diagram. So the second boundary which I see over here is the VPC. So we need to create a VPC. So VPC is a virtual private cloud. So it's actually a physical data center if you compare with our physical world scenario. So VPC is just like a virtual physical data center for us, so that any resource which we create will be residing inside our VPC. So let's go back to our AWS console over here, and in the search bar type VPC, click on this VPC, and here you will find an option to create an VPC. So click on create VPC. So here you need to click on VPC only. There are one more option, VPC and more, but we are gonna stick with our very basic option, which is VPC only. So here you need to enter the name. So I'm just gonna put test VPC. Here you need to enter the IP range, because any resource which you want to create inside the VPC need to have the IP addresses. So for that, we are just going to define the IP ranges. We are not going to define a single IP. We are defining a IP ranges so that any resource which you create inside the VPC will get the IP address out of that particular range. So here I'm just gonna, for this demo, gonna keep this IP ranges, which is 12.0.0.0/16. So this is a CIDR block which you need to pay careful attention when you're creating an VPC. Alright, so now we have entered the VPC name, IP ranges we have assigned. So here, this is a tags which it has generated automatically, which is name and the value. So I'm just gonna stick with that, and I'm just gonna click on create VPC. Alright, so here, just go back to the VPC link over here, and here you can see there are two VPCs. So click on it, and here you can see I'm just going to refresh it. So here you can see this is a test VPC which I have created, and this is the default VPC which you generally get. So I'm not going to use any default VPC, but I'm just going to stick with my own VPC which I have just created. So now we have created our VPC. The next item which we need to create from this diagram is to create an internet gateway so that any user can access our AWS network with the internet gateway. So again, go to AWS console over here. In the search bar, you can either type VPC because we have the internet gateway option available inside our VPC. So here you will either find from the left hand side, here you will see internet gateway option, or either you can see this internet gateway tile, which is a rectangular tiles which is present onto our VPC dashboard. So I'm just going to click on this internet gateway, and here you can see this is a default gateway which has been created previously, but we are not going to use that one. I'm just going to click on create internet gateway, and here I'm just going to type IGW for internet gateway abbreviation, and I'm just going to type test over here, and that's it. And then just simply click on create internet gateway, and we can verify it. Just go over here, and here you can see this is our test internet gateway which I have just created. The next thing which we need to do over here is this internet gateway is not attached with our VPC. So if you go back to our diagram over here, then you can see this VPC and this internet gateway has to be attached. So what I'll do, I'll just click on this internet gateway ID over here, click on action, go to attach VPC, and here you can see the option of a test VPC which we have just created. So select this VPC, attach internet gateway, and that's how we create our VPC and we attach our internet gateway. So now after creating the internet gateway, the next item which we need to create from the diagram is to create our public subnet as well as our private subnet. So these are the two elements which we are going to create. So again, go back to our AWS console, and you can click on this VPC dashboard over here, and here you will find an option for a subnet. So click on it. And here you will find some default subnet which has been already created by AWS for you, but we are not going to use those one. We are just going to create two subnets. One is public and one is private subnet. So click on this create subnet, and here you can type, or here you need to select the VPC, because if you take a look onto this particular diagram, then everything happening inside the VPC. So these subnets also exist inside our VPC. So here, first of all, you need to select the VPC. So we will gonna select this test VPC because that's the one which we have created. So select this one, and here we need to enter the name of our subnet. So what I'm just gonna do, I'm just gonna put the name of my subnet. So here I'm just gonna put test public subnet. And here I'm just going to put 1A. I'm just going to show you why I'm putting 1A. So here you need to select the availability zone. So since I'm based in Europe, so that's why I'm just going to choose the nearest region. So I'm just going to choose Central 1A. That's why I have chosen a 1A, so that I know like in which region my subnet exists. So that's the one thing which you need to keep in mind. Otherwise, it's not a problem. If you just keep a test public subnet, that's also up to you. That's absolutely fine. The next thing which we need to do over here is we need to specify the IP range for that particular subnet. So if you create an EC2 instance inside that particular subnet, then it will get the IP address from that particular range. So that's a key thing over here. Okay, so I'm just going to put the IP address, so 12.0.1.0, which is similar in the range of our VPC. In the VPC, we have defined the 12.0.0.0. So here I have chosen the value which is 12.0.1 for this particular public subnet. Okay, so here we have created our public subnet. Then we are going to do one more thing. We are just going to create the private subnet at the same time. So click on add subnet over here, and I'm just going to copy this name. I'm just being a little lazy over here, so I'm just going to put it as a private availability zone. I'm just going to select 1A. And here I just need to specify the IP address. Sorry, I will just remove this one. I'll just copy the IP address from here. But here this time I need to select a different IP range for this private subnet. So I'm just going to paste it, and I'm just going to choose, let's say 3 over here. Okay, and then the tags, I'm just going to stick with the default one, and after that I'm just going to verify the details. So here we have the VPC. Inside that VPC we have a public subnet, we have the IP range for that one, and we have a private subnet with the IP range and the tags also created. So just click on create subnet over here, and here you can see our subnets has been created. So let's take a look onto the diagram which we are trying to achieve over here into our AWS environment. So here you can see we have created VPC, we have created internet gateway, public subnet and private subnet. The one thing which I forgot to tell you in the initial example is the route table. So we need to have a route table so that our request which is coming from our internet gateway can be routed to our public subnet as well as to our private subnet. So for that we need to create a route table also. So for that what we need to do, we just need to go back to our AWS console, click on this VPC dashboard, and here there is an option for a route table. So click on route tables and then click on create route table. But before that, you can see there are some default route table which has already been created. So you just don't need to use those default route table. I'm just gonna close this successful messages. So I'm just gonna click on create route table over here. And here you need to enter the name of your route table. So I'm just going to copy that name which I have already pasted into my notepad. So this is the name of my route table, and this route table is for public subnet. So that's why I'm adding the keyword public over here so that we can use this route table only for our public subnet. All right. Next thing, again, we need to choose the VPC, which is our test VPC, because as you can see into the diagram, everything we are doing inside our VPC. So that's why I'm choosing the VPC every time whenever I'm creating any new resource. All right, so that's been done, and the tags I'm just gonna keep as it is, the default one which has already been created, that is test public RT for route table. Click on create route table. And here you can see our route table has been created, but this route table has not been associated with our public subnet. So if you take a look onto this diagram, then if you create a route table, which you can see in the middle, has to be associated with the subnet. Since this route table is only for public subnet, so I'm just gonna associate with our public subnet. So again, go back to AWS console over here, click on this subnet association, and remember I'm inside my route table. So if you are confused, then again go back to route tables. This is my route table which I have created, test public RT, click on this ID, then go to subnet association, click on edit subnet association, and here I'm just gonna associate the public subnet and then save association. So here you can see our public route table has been associated with our public subnet. Important thing over here in the route table is whenever you're working with the public route table which is associated with a public subnet, then you need to provide an internet access. Right now you have just defined the routes, and we have just defined the route table and we have associated with our public subnet, but we have not provided an internet access to that particular route table and internet gateway. So what I'm just going to do, I'm just going to define a route so that we can access the internet, or that particular subnet can have an access to internet. So for that, what you need to do, you just need to click on routes over here. Again, I'm just going to start from the first step. So here, these are the route tables. Here, this is my route table. I'm just going to click on this route table ID, and here you will find an option to routes. Subnet we have already associated with our public subnet, so we don't need to do anything. Click on this routes, click on edit routes, and here you need to select add routes. So here you need to enter the IP address. So for providing the internet address, internet access, you need to choose the IP address which is 0.0.0.0. So which means anyone can access this particular route table, or at least this internet gateway, and this route table has an internet access. Next thing is the target. In the target, you need to choose the internet gateway which we have just created. So select the internet gateway over here, and here you will find the option automatically which is internet gateway test. So select that one and then click on save changes. So now if we go back to our diagram, so you can see, so now we have the VPC, we have the internet gateway, we have the route table for public subnet, and this public subnet needs an internet access so that a user can access this Bastion host. So for that purpose, we have just defined the public route or the internet access for that particular route table. We have created the public route table. So similarly, we also need to create a private route table for our private subnet. So again, go back to our AWS console. And here you just need to click on the route tables, click on create route table, just enter the name, that is test private route table. And once you select the name or enter the name, then you need to choose the VPC. So here the VPC is test VPC, which we have just created. And the name and the tags, I'm just gonna keep as it is. I'm just gonna click on create route table. And now our route table has been created. And remember, this is a private subnet route table, and it doesn't need an internet access. So I'm just going to stick with the default route with this IP address, which means that it will not have an access to internet, but it will have an internal access within the VPC. So which means if we take a look onto this particular diagram, then this EC2 or any resource which is running into this private subnet can access a public subnet, or it can be a vice versa. So anyone which has a public subnet, or any resource which is present into the public subnet, can access the private subnet resources as well. All right, so let's go back to our AWS console, and here we need to associate this route table with our private subnet. So I'm just going to click on subnet association, click on edit subnet, select the private subnet and save association, and that's been done. So now we have also created the route table, which is public as well as private. So now we have created the route table, we have created the public subnet and the private subnet. Now it's time for us to create our Bastion host as well as our EC2 instance in our private subnet. And if I compare with the example which I have taken for a castle, so we just need to create this tunnel, which is a Bastion host, and we also need to create a castle, which is an EC2 instance running into private subnet. So we'll be creating two EC2 instances, and then we will see how this Bastion host can access this EC2 instance, which is running into our private subnet. So here is my AWS console, and I'm onto the dashboard homepage of my AWS console. In the search box, you need to type EC2. We are just gonna first create our Bastion host EC2 instance. So click on EC2 and click on launch instance. And here you need to enter the name of your Bastion host, or which is present, which we will be creating inside our public subnet. So here I'm just gonna enter the name, that is test EC2 public instance. After that, I need to choose the operating system which I want to get installed onto my virtual machine. So I'm just going to choose Ubuntu. I'm just going to stick with the free tier because I'm just doing this for demo purpose. But if you're not doing this for demo purpose, and if you want this to be an actual environment, so then just choose some suitable high performance CPU. All right, so now we have chosen the Ubuntu. Just choose the architecture, whatever feels suitable to you. I'm just going to choose 64-bit. And here I'm just sticking with T2.micro. Here we need to select the key pair so that we can SSH into our EC2 instance. So if you don't know like how to create this SSH key pair, then you can simply click on create new key pair. So click on this, and here you can see here you need to enter the key name. So what will happen over here is it will create two keys for you. One is the public key and another one is the private key. So once I enter the name keys for Bastion host demo, I'm just doing it for the demo purpose. So I'm just going to show you like how it is going to generate the keys, but I have already generated those keys, so I'm just going to use those keys. But you can just follow these steps if in case you are doing the keys generation for the first time. So just click on create key pair, and as soon as you will click on this create key pair, it will download you the private key, which you can see over here, like keys for Bastion host demo.pam. That is your private key which you need to keep with you. And it has already associated the public key with this EC2 instance, which you can see, which we are just trying to create over here. That is test EC2 public instance. And here it has already associated the public key, which is key for Bastion host demo. So this public key is already associated with this EC2 instance once you select from this drop down. Okay, so that's the step you need to follow in case if you don't have the keys already with you. I have already generated my key. So here I'm just going to choose this one. That is AWS EC2. That's the key I generally use for demo purpose. Okay, so that about the keys. The next thing which we need to pay careful attention over here is the network setting, because here we need to carefully assign the VPC subnet what we are going to use for this particular EC2 instance. So click on this network setting and click on edit. And let's take a look onto the diagram once again. I'm just going to open the slide. So here we need to choose the VPC, the one which we have created. So I'm just going to go over here, drop down. Here we are going to choose test VPC. Here we need to choose the subnet. Since this is a EC2 instance Bastion host that needs to be available into our public subnet. So if you can take a look onto this diagram once again. So here you can see this is our public subnet. So I'm just going to choose the public subnet. I think I can see, yeah, here is the public subnet which is already selected. auto assign public IP. That's really important because you need to enable the public IP so that you can access this particular machine from your remote system. So I will be accessing this machine, this particular Bastion host from my own laptop. So I'm just gonna set enable security group. That's also important. So you just need to assign the security group name. So here I'm just gonna use the existing name, public instance. I'm just gonna use that one, and I'm just gonna put and suffix with the SG for security group. You can put the same description over here, and here you can set the SSH type because we need to SSH into our EC2 instance. That's why we need to enable this SSH security group, and we need to define this particular rule so that we can open the port 22. Otherwise, we will not be able to SSH into our machine. All right, that's been done. And after that, just check how much memory you need. So I'm just using the 8 GB. If you need more, just add it more. And after that, we can just click on the launch instance. So I'm just clicking over here. So here you can see our EC2 instance has been launched, or our Bastion host has been launched, which you can verify from here. So here you can see test EC2 public instance. So that's the EC2 instance which is in a pending state. So it will be started pretty soon. It will get started pretty soon actually. I'm just going to refresh it. It might take a couple of minutes. So just wait for it. And here you can see our state. It is in running state actually. So if I go back to here, click on EC2, there is a filter also where it only shows the running instances. So here you can see I have a filter running, and now you can see the EC2 public instance, which is our Bastion host, now is running. One thing which came into my mind, I would like to rename this instance to suffix it with the name like a Bastion so that it's easy to identify which is our Bastion host. So that's the change I would like to do it. The next thing which we need to do right now is to create an EC2 instance into our private subnet. So if I take a look onto this diagram once again, so here we have done with creation of a Bastion host. Now we need to create an EC2 instance which is into our private subnet. And if I compare with my example, then that's our castle. So again, what we need to do, we just need to go to EC2 dashboard, click on launch instances, and select the name over here. So I'm just going to copy the name from my notepad. So that is going to be our test EC2 private instance. So here, this is the private instance. I'm just going to select Ubuntu is my base operating system. I'm just going to select the key pair, which is the one which I have already created. In case if you are just creating, then choose that the key name which you have just created for you. All right, I'm just going to edit the network setting. Here I'm just going to select test VPC. I'm just going to select the private subnet over here. And yeah, I'm just making sure that I'm selecting, yeah, that's correct. And auto assign public IP. I don't need a public IP. This is an EC2 instance into my private subnet. That's why we don't need a public IP. After that, here I'm just going to create the security group. So I'm just going to suffix it with the SJ private. Same thing over here. Now we need to define the security group roles. That's really important. Here we need to SSH. We need to access that particular private EC2 instance. That's why we are just going to enable the SSH for port 22. But source type. So from where you need to access this private EC2 instance. So we need to access from our public subnet from our Bastion host. So we need to access this EC2 instance from our Bastion host. And this Bastion host is residing into this IP address, that is 12.0.1.0. So that's our public IP, not public, but the IP range of my public subnet. So I'm just going to copy this IP range onto the source. So I'm just going to go over here, click on custom, and here I'm just going to specify this IP range over here. Select this one. That's been done. And I think we are quite good with that. And after that, we can just verify the other settings. So other settings seems good. I'm just going to click on launch instances. And here you can see our EC2 instance has been launched. So which we can verify. I'm just going to go back to dashboard once again. Click on instance running. Just wait for a minute. I'm just gonna remove this filter. So here you can see this is our private instance, which is in pending state, which should come up and running in a minute. And here you can see our both instances are running. Our Bastion host is running and our test EC2 private instance is also running. So now we have done the infra setup for our Bastion host. Now the first thing which we need to do is we need to access our EC2 instance of our Bastion host. So this is the user, and now we will try to access our Bastion host. So for that, what we need to do, we just need to go to dashboard, our EC2 dashboard. Here, click on this public Bastion host, click on this ID, and here we need to copy the public IP4 address of this particular Bastion host. So that's the public IP which you can copy. But key thing over here, how would you connect to this EC2 instance, which is our Bastion host? So just you need to click on connect, and here you will find all the instruction which is necessary to copy into your terminal. So first of all, what you need to do, you just need to identify your public, your private key actually. So the private key is the one which you have downloaded when you are creating your EC2 instance. So in my case, the private key with the name AWS EC2 _ Terraform, that's the one for me. But in case if you have seen, like we have created a key like key for Bastion host.demo, that's your own private key, but you can keep the name of your choice when you have created. So just select that particular key. And I'm just going to open the terminal over here. So here you can see this is my terminal, and I'm just going to run the lslart command, and here you can see this is the private key of me. But in your case, that private key might be ending with the extension .pam. That's absolutely fine. You don't need to worry about it. All right, the next thing which you need to do over here, we need to change the mode of that particular private key. So I'm just going to copy this command chmod 400. I'm just going to clear the screen. And after that, I'm just going to type AWS EC2 Terraform. That's my private key, but change this name to your private key, which you have created during the EC2 launch. I have changed it. The next thing which we need to do is we need to copy this SSH command from here. That will help you to SSH into your EC2 instance of Bastion host. Okay, I'm just gonna copy this particular command, and here we need to remove few things over here. So I'm just gonna first of all remove the .pub extension because that's not a public key, and I don't need it, and I don't have a PAM extension at the end. So I'm just gonna stick with this simple thing. Okay, so here this is the SSH command, this is the I, and this is the private key, and this is the Ubuntu, that is user, and this is the public IP of my EC2 instance. I'm just gonna hit enter. And it's gonna say, are you sure you want to connecting? So I said yes. And here you can see we are now entered into our EC2 instance of our Bastion host. So here you can see this is the IP range, which is within the range of my public subnet, that is 12.0.1.2.1.4. That's the IP address which you can verify from here also. So that's the IP address which has been assigned to my Bastion host. So now our user on this diagram, you can see already entered into the Bastion host. Now we need to enter into the EC2 instance, which is present into our private subnet. So we are already into our Bastion host, and from there we will access our private subnet. So how to do that? So for that purpose, I'm just going to open one more terminal. So this is a one more terminal. And remember, we have used the same SSH keys for EC2 into the Bastion, into the public subnet as well. We have used the same SSH key pair for our private subnet EC2 instance also. So what we need to do, we need to copy that private key into our Bastion host. So for that, I'm just going to go to the directory where I'm storing my SSH key. And here I will just go and copy the AWS EC2 my private key. So I'm just going to run the cat command, and after that I'm just going to copy the whole content, go to my Bastion host. This is my Bastion host. I'm just going to clear it. I'm just going to create a file, AWS EC2 instance. Let's put name as key. Okay, I'm just going to open into the VI mode, paste the content of a key, save and quit. After that, I need to change the mode of this one. So 400 AWS EC2 public key and hit enter. That's been done. So now we have copied our private key into our Bastion host. So you can see over here into this diagram. So now we have copied that key so that we can access this EC2 instance using that particular key. So the next thing which we need to have the private IP of my EC2 instance running into the private subnet. So for that, what I'll do, I'll just go back to my console. So here is my console, click on EC2, click on, I just need to refresh it. Here you can see 2 instances, click on it. And here we need to click the private instance, click on this instance ID. And here you can see there is no public IP address because that's our private EC2 instance running into private subnet. All right, so here I'm just going to copy this private IP of my private instance, go back to my terminal over here, and here we need to form that particular command once again. So that is ssh/i, and then we need to enter the AWS key, which is our private key. After that, Ubuntu, the name of the user for the EC2 instance, and after that we need to enter the IP address, the private IP address of my EC2 instance. Click enter, type yes. And here you can see we already entered into our EC2 instance running into private subnet. So which you can verify, this is the IP address 12.0.3.192 and which you can verify from here. So that's a private instance which is available for you. So this is how this whole Bastion setup works. So now we have set up the VPC, internet gateway, public subnet, private subnet. We have created an EC2 instance, which is our Bastion host. And now we are able to first access the Bastion host, and then we are able to access our EC2 instance also, which is running into our private subnet. Hope you liked today's session on setting up your Bastion host and all the AWS network related stuff which is necessary for this whole setup. And if you're interested into the similar content, there are many more sessions which I have planned for AWS, which will be coming into the upcoming weeks. So stay tuned for that. And if you have any question, then please put down into the comment section. And if you have any suggestion for any new topic, then also those are welcome. So stay tuned. See you into the next session of our DevOps and AWS. Till then, take care and bye bye.